Very good. Now we're going to get on to our keynote speaker, which is Josh Blake. He's a guy that he's been there since 2016. I've supported him since I saw him as a candidate. It's been a pleasure working for him on the board. And in my opinion, I wish we had a few more Josh Blakes on the board. And yeah, I think so. There's folks here that have had that thought as well. And I'm going to let Josh do the rest of the talk, and let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes. I appreciate it. I appreciate being able to go speak to a group where I know where everybody stands for the most part. Sometimes you go to speak to a Kiwanis Club or Rotary or something, a lot of nice people, but you don't always know, ideologically where they're at. So it's nice to talk to you guys. I'm not going to take for granted that everybody here knows, me and who I am, where I come from, so I'm going to give a brief sort of bio of myself. I was born in Winter Park, but my family moved to Lake County, and specifically unincorporated Lake area when I was 5. And I'm 6th generation Floridian. Kind of an interesting family anecdote. I was talking to the Lake County Historical Society about some of my family history a few meetings back. And in 1911, my great-great-grandmother, my great-great-grandfather, they were from Micanopy. And she was with some of her girlfriends on a road trip to go to Ocala for lunch from Micanopy. And a pine tree fell across the road and killed her in 1911 when my great-grandfather was 6 years old. So he and his brother were raised by their father. He ended up getting a football scholarship. He wanted to play football for the University of Florida. And they didn't give him a scholarship. He was too poor to pay for it. He used to hunt Payne's Prairie for rounded. That's how poor they were. And so he got a scholarship to NC State, went up and was very successful. He was in the National College Football Hall of Fame at NC State, and ended up coming back here to this area as the athletic director at Rollins College in the 40s. He was there for decades, and eventually in the late 50s, for 8 years, he was Orange County Commissioner in just the county south of here. So anyway, that's just part of the family history there. But I'm actually named after him. He's a good guy. But I went to the University of North Florida, got a political science degree. I came back here. I started working for the Republican Party of Florida within a year of graduation. I worked specifically on special elections. So when somebody did something really bad and got removed by the governor or resigned, they'd argue up and send a team of 3 or 4 of us to live in a hotel for a month or 2. And I did about 4 elections that year. That way, the first one I did was for Chris Dorworth, who was going to be Speaker of the House. So if you remember that, he lost unexpectedly. So I did that. I came back to my home area here, and I was offered the job of campaign manager for one of our local state representatives, Marlene O'Toole. I ran her campaign, and when she won, she offered me the job of legislative assistant. So I thought, I'll do that for a couple of years, and I'll get back into campaigns and see what happens. And I stayed with her the whole 8 years. She was a retired IBM executive, and we had a really good relationship, and so it was really interesting to work for her. And at the end of that 8 years, it followed some interesting timing with one of the largest tax increases in Lake County history by 3 of the 5 city commissioners at the time. And so after conversations with some local business people, I jumped in that race, not thinking I had much of a prayer, but thinking it would be an interesting bucket list adventure. And so anyway, we worked hard, and just I think with the sort of the Trump effect, as far as anti-incumbent attitude and things, and in addition to working very hard and having a lot of folks in this room who worked very hard to help me out, we were able to pull it off and win by 20 points, which was shocking. But anyway, so that's how I got on the county commission. My wife is a speech therapist in the school system locally here. We have 2 2-year-olds. So that's why I look like I've never slept ever. I have 2 2-year-olds. And
it only gets better.
It only gets better, yeah. They're a lot of fun. We took them to Fort Wilderness this past weekend camping, and it's like a Pioneer Davy. So I bought them 2 little coonskin caps. And so they've been running around the house. It's one of the cutest things you've ever seen in matching coonskin hats. So anyway, just to give some background, one thing I wanted to touch on before I got into the county update is my political philosophy. Because oftentimes we have elected officials who will vote a certain way, and it's confusing, it might not make sense to you. I like to explain to people what my political philosophy is so you can understand why I do, why I vote the way I vote, and what sort of I measure things up against. It's impossible when you run for office to know everything that's going to get thrown your way. I can tell you that a lot of unexpected things have come before us. But if you have a set of principles that you are firm on, you measure everything up against your guiding principles, and that ends up being a somewhat predictable measure of how you're going to vote, hopefully. Anybody who's, I'm sure in this room, most people have heard of John Stuart Mill, British philosopher. He wrote the essay in 1859 on liberty, and it's one of the founding philosophical justifications for libertarian thought. He was a sort of a disciple of the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham, who came up with utilitarianism. But he wrote this book called On Liberty in 1859, and essentially I'll boil it down to there's two sort of camps in political philosophy, and this remains true today. He talks about something called the harm principle, and his position is that the only legitimate use of government to keep you from doing something or to otherwise interfere with your life is to prevent you from harming someone. That's the only legitimate way that you should use the government, not to be the opposing principle we call the paternalism principle, which is nanny state government, right? We know what's best for you. You know you shouldn't have a bib goal from 7-Eleven, so we're going to ban them, says Michael Bloomberg. So those are the two sort of competing philosophies, and I'm convinced that no matter what party engagement we have in this country, it comes down to the harm principle, essentially. It's a spectrum, but versus the paternalism principle. Spoiler alert, I'm firmly a harm principle guy. I believe there are very limited reasons to become a nanny over somebody. You really never should. It's basic law enforcement, infrastructure, these sorts of things. And it's not a super popular position. There are people, even fellow Republicans, there are big government conservatives who believe that their vision of the government should be imposed on people. I believe you have to be very careful. I lean heavily toward the harm principle side of things. It's going back to our founding fathers. There were sort of two arguments: is it the liberty of the people is the supreme law, or is the safety of the people the supreme law? And you remember Benjamin Franklin's famous quote that those who prefer security over liberty don't deserve either. And so I tend to fall into that camp. I'll give you an example. I know that's kind of like abstract, but an example of harm principles type stuff that we've dealt with at the county commission is architectural design standards. We have the CRA in Sereno, Mount Plymouth, and we came up shortly after I got on the commission. We came up for a vote, and I'm looking through these plans that we have, and they are basically designing within the CRA what commercial buildings are allowed to be built. I'm talking detailed, like this is the angle of the roof, this is this is how many external features, this is what the shrubs need to look like. I don't think that's any of my business. Now, I took aesthetics in college, and I know that the first guiding principle of aesthetics is taste cannot be disputed. So why are 5 people on the county commission telling Gary what your landscaping should look like if you got a mom and pop business that you're trying to build? So that's just sort of like a common sense way that it's one of those things that I don't think it's any of our business. And I say that a lot, actually. I read an essay, is this any of our business? So that's an example. Another example is in the county code. We have 32 pages of landscape regulations. I asked it, the county code is this thick, and I'm flipping through it when I first got elected, and I was like, looking at, it gives you some options, but you have to follow these landscape regulations. I find kind of ridiculous. I don't care if you're building a business or a storefront here. I don't care what kind of plants you have or how many of them or the caliper inches of the tree you decide to plant. So I actually, at the first goals workshop that we had after I was elected, I suggested that we repeal all 32 pages of landscape regulations. And
you paid a lot for this.
What's that?
You paid a lot for this.
Yeah, exactly. And Lauren Ritchie loved my idea. She didn't really love my idea. But anyway, there was I looked like I'd grown a third head or something. But anyway, those are the kinds of things that I kind of find outrageous, and it's one of those things that if you're not looking at it with a sort of fresh set of eyes, and it's just always been that way. The builders and the folks who make a living just kind of used to it. Oh, we have to go and we have to turn in our landscape plans and all this other stuff. And that's fine if you agree with that. I just don't think it's any of my business. Taste can't be disputed, and I'm not going to impose my aesthetic vision on a private citizen in Lake County. So another example of this, we had a situation, this was actually in the paper a couple weeks ago, even though we voted on this back in May, somebody came to me one day, somebody I knew who was a chiropractor, came up to my office very frustrated, and he had a situation where his grandparents lived on Lake Dora, they passed away. So his family was out there. They would spend the weekends in their house, doing stuff on the lake, trying to repair things. You know what happens with docks when they get old? The wood starts to sort of peel up and you trip on it when you're walking out there. So he calls the county. He tries to do the right thing. He calls the county and says, do I need a building permit? They said, no, only if you're going to replace a certain amount. Well, what's a certain amount? Well, more than a handful. I think they even told him like more than 40% or something. They gave him a percentage. It was just super vague. So he went and got a lot of wood and started replacing what needed replacing. And code enforcement shows up and shuts him down after he's trying to go through this process properly. And so he's very frustrated. He comes up to me and I said, well, why is a permit involved at all with surface wood on docks? What environmental impact is that having? You're not messing with the pylons, with the lake bed, any of that stuff. And so we sat down with Tony Lopresto and some folks at the county, and nobody could really come up with a reason that somebody needs to pay $150 or whatever it is to replace the wood on their dock and have somebody come out and say, yeah, you replaced it and sign off on it. And so we were able to come up with something. We repealed that, and we have over 6,000 docks in Lake County. And so I didn't realize what an issue that was. It's one of those things where you don't realize until somebody makes you aware. I don't have a dock, so I would never know. But it's just another example, and I'm sure when it comes to building permits, there are plenty of examples like that where it's probably not necessary for the permit to be in existence at all. But so we repealed that, and I think that's a really big thing. And in this business, you sort of have to grab onto those small victories and say, hey, that's good, we're making progress. So that's one thing, and just as an example of where I come down in the harm principle, that kind of thing. I did want to talk a little bit about one of my pet peeves. And when I speak up here, I'm not disparaging any of my fellow commissioners. I think they're all sincere people. But we give in the county over $2 million away to 501c3s. And some of them are good 501c3s, I'm sure, probably most of them. I have a problem with the county. Well, let me illustrate this. If Andy gives $100 to the Red Cross, I think it's a wonderful thing, or to a local charity. That's a noble thing. There's almost nothing more noble we can do than to sacrificially give something that you've worked hard for to someone else out of the goodness of your heart. However, if Jan holds a gun to Andy's head and tells him to give money to the Red Cross and says, if you don't, we're going to come and sell your house to pay your taxes in a couple of years, I have a problem with that because that becomes immoral. Two very different things. Many of you might know this. When Senator Marco, I'm not totally crazy saying this, I'm going to give an example of somebody who might have some credibility who agrees with me. Marco Rubio, when he ran for Speaker of the House in the Florida legislature, one of his, maybe perhaps it was his number one priority, was to change the property tax system in this country to a consumption tax. Kind of the same idea as the fair tax nationally. And the reason he wanted to do that is because he said what anybody who knows how it works thinks, which is, in a system the way that we have it, you never really own your property. You rent it from the government. And if you don't believe me, don't really do this. But if you don't believe me, don't pay your taxes for a few years and see what happens. Eventually, somebody with a gun shows up and tells you it's time to move on, and they sell your property and pay your tax bill. It's the system we have. I understand we live in the world as it exists, but just an example of why the level of scrutiny for how you allocate and appropriate tax money that is taken by force from people, you really have to limit it to the necessities. And I posted something, President Calvin Coolidge said, taking any more tax money than is absolutely necessary is legalized robbery. And I agree with that. It sounds extreme. I tend to agree with that. And so that's why I think that, I even brought the list of all the 501c3s that we gave money to this year. There's some really good programs in there. And to be fair, about half of that does go to LifeStream. And we are constitutionally required to provide for the health care in some way for some of our citizens. And that has sort of a public safety and criminal justice element to it in some ways. But there are a lot of little things, like we give $25,000 a year to a foundation that's supposed to reduce dropout prevention. Now, does anyone come to us at the end of the year and explain to me how many dropouts were prevented? Is there any accountability for that $25,000? Absolutely not. And so that's just an example of something. I voted against the budget this year, and that's one reason is that we give away a lot of money. I personally think I have a philosophical problem with giving away money when that's really the duty of the private citizen to donate money to charity.
Josh?
Yes, sir.
if you are going to get that, that's the world that we live in,
Yes,
why aren't you demanding accountability?
I did, actually. Yeah, I met with the county manager, and I said, you know, if the county, well, you have to understand that in any government system, especially one that has 5 separate people that are making the decisions that hire the county manager, I can certainly voice my opinion on something, but it takes 3 people to agree with me for something to happen, including a directive to the county manager. But I did express that to the county manager. I said, this money, if we're going to give it away, and there's nothing I can do about it, please expect an explanation of what the results are. We give $10,000 away to a charity in Southwick County that teaches swimming lessons. That's great for kids to learn how to swim. I think that's a wonderful thing. But I just don't think it's something you take money, tax money, to spend it on. So, just an example. But yeah, I did raise that point on.
And the result was?
Well, as I said, I'm only one of 5, and everybody else was okay with it. So I brought it up in a meeting. But anyway.
That's why I said we need more Joshes on the board.
So anyway, on to the county update here on some of the other stuff we've been working on. And some of this stuff you already know, but I'm just going to sort of go through the list to let you know. You know that the gas tax was pulled off in favor of the school tax, the school safety tax, which did pass, and for better or worse. One thing that we did do is with capital financing a few months ago now, the board did vote based on the penny sales tax revenue, to finance 2 projects. One was public safety radios. That was something, it was a $14 million expense. A lot of that will get paid back because we bought bulk, so the cities could buy their public safety radios from us, and then we were able to get a much better deal. It was about a $7 million price difference by doing it that way. But that is one thing. If you don't have public safety radios for your ambulances and your firefighters and your police departments and sheriff's deputies, so that is the only project that I considered acceptable to support in terms of the finance, because the end of service was coming up this year. Now, I will tell you this, I'm not trying to make excuses for myself, but the previous county commissions did not budget to have the money available to purchase new radios when those other radios were going out of service. So what we have done, County Manager Jeff Cole has budgeted now going forward that we're going to put a certain amount of money away every year so that when these radios go out of service, we will be able to buy them cash. And that's paid for by the penny sales tax, not from general revenue. The other project that was up for capital finance discussion that day was the animal shelter. It passed. I voted against financing the animal shelter, not because I don't like animals, but because I think it's one of those things you pay for as you can afford to pay for it. And we have an animal shelter. I think there were cheaper ways to go about it. So, not commenting on it so much, just to let you know that those are the 2 things that are getting financed through the penny sales tax. One thing that I am really proud of, I am proud of a couple things. One thing I'm really proud of with our commission is that after the Parkland shooting, you guys know how traumatic that was. It happened toward the end of the legislative session. It upended all sorts of things. After the Parkland shooting, the very next meeting, I made a motion to amend our employee handbook to allow all county employees to carry concealed weapons at work. This is not something that I had only started working on after Parkland. I know it seemed that way, but I had worked on that for 3 months prior to Parkland and trying to figure out the best timing for it, because I knew we had a couple members who were up in Republican primaries. I was trying to be strategic about when we did it so we could make sure that it would pass. But it provided really the perfect opportunity. We were able to have a really good discussion about gun-free zones and how counterintuitive it is to prevent people from defending themselves. I told somebody the other day, I said, the same people who freak out when you declaw a cat are the ones that don't want a 20-year-old woman who has to walk home at night to be able to carry a gun, to fend off a rapist or something. It's really weird how they're able to have these huge blind spots. But anyway, it passed unanimously. And I was really proud of that. And, you would not believe how many emails and phone calls I got from county employees who said, thank you so much for code enforcement, female code enforcement officers. You have to go out alone in some pretty seedy places. Said, I really appreciate that. This is kind of a funny story. About a week and a half after that passed, I got a phone call, saying that the Wall Street Journal wanted me to call them back. Rachel finds out in the Wall Street Journal. And at first, I'm not lying to you, at first I thought it was a trick by Warren Ritchie to give me a call back. And so I wasn't going to do it. I was like, I'm wise to that. I'm not calling back. But anyway, I looked up Rachel Feinzag, sure enough, is a real reporter. And I called her back, and a couple weeks later, the Wall Street Journal wrote an excellent piece, and a large portion of it was devoted to Lake County and the national discussion about guns at work. A lot of it had to do with the private sector, obviously, but it was really great, and I didn't know how I was going to turn out, but it was quite favorable and at least objective, which is all I ever asked. But so anyway, I was really excited about that, and that's one thing that I think it's good that it gets out and it's advertised. That if somebody walks in the door planning harm on people, they're not going to know which county employee. And if they're going to go mess with a couple of our guys out doing road maintenance, they don't know. You know, we've got armed citizens in this county, and that's a good thing. So I mentioned briefly the budget. Andy and Marie were there. So the budget last year, this affected both of our budget years, unfortunately, but last year it looked like we were going to be able to reduce the millage rate, and Hurricane Irma came in right toward the our budget process there. And so last year they kept status quo rate. The millage was the same, but that means that if your property value goes up, you're still paying more in taxes. So I voted against the budget for that reason. Similar situation this year, except we were dealing with the financial aftermath of Hurricane Irma. And Hurricane Irma cost us $10 million, which was 70% of our reserves. And 70% of our reserves is a big chunk, and we have a board policy that we try to keep between 7 and 12% of our general revenue reserves. And that's not just because we like to have it as a rainy day fund, that's because it affects our bond rating and some other things. It's just, for our financial health, it's good to have a buffer there. So this year, I voted against the budget again. It was a 4-1 vote. The reason I did so was because I believe that if we had held the constitutional officers to a status quo budget, and of course, Channel 9 took that little quote from me on the status quo budget, and I got slammed by some people in the sheriff's department. But to me, it's so interesting because in government, if all you do is say use the same amount that you had last year, that is considered a cut. Yeah. That is considered a cut. And as much as I am supportive, I consider myself very supportive of law enforcement, especially with all the stuff they had to deal with under President Obama and the disrespect and just general mayhem. The sheriff did come to us with an additional $10 million request this year, a 15% hike. If we had given him what he asked for, we would have had to raise taxes $8 million. So that's the discussion that we were having when I said my position is the constitutional officers need to have what they did last year, allow us to use to replenish our reserves to protect our bond rating, try to be responsible. There's obviously politics at play when it comes to constitutional officers and budgets and things. So what ended up happening this year is they kept the status quo rate the same, but we did have considerably more revenue, and enough to give the sheriff a almost 6% increase. And his argument was that he needed to increase his starting salaries to retain deputies. And I don't know. I'm sure that's probably true that it helps to retain deputies if you have a higher salary. But my position was that we needed to get our sort of affairs in order to clean up after Hurricane Irma. We got the debris cleaned up, but we got to clean our sort of financial house, get it in order. One question I asked, and you might think this is crazy, but I was sitting down with Jeff and Melanie after the storm, and I said, I hate that we were having to put a lot of money back in reserves. I said, would it be nice if instead of having to keep 10% of reserves, and this is something the bond issue, is there any entity that would provide us with catastrophic debris cleanup insurance?
Tavares did that. Tavares did that and got almost everything paid for.
With insurance?
Yeah.
Well, we had our broker look into it, and it doesn't. Apparently, it's not a thing. I don't know what they did, but there's no insurer out there that's willing to write you a policy for, say, if I wanted to insure $8 million worth of debris cleanup, if all these conditions are met, if the winds exceeded what, you know how the insurance companies are, if all these conditions are met. And so I even called Scott Hyman, who's currently the broker, and I said, Scott, is this a thing? Okay, he called Lloyd's of London. No, it's not a thing. And so, interestingly enough, I read a paper that Lloyd's wrote about this topic, and they said, one reason that these products don't exist, these insurance products, is because of FEMA. It's because the government prices these private sector alternatives out of the market. And if you're going to get 75% reimbursed by FEMA, why would you bother paying a premium, right? Now, that's an interesting point, because we will hopefully get 75% left Hurricane Irma reimbursed. But to date, I think we've gotten 50,000 maybe back, and so it's going to be a long time. And anyway, I think that's just an example of where you probably would have a pretty decent insurance product if the federal government weren't providing something for free. We all pay for it, but just an interesting point. One thing I want to mention here we're going to be dealing with this, and this is one reason I was so hesitant to give any pay increases or to commit to building anything big, is because the super homestead exemption is on the ballot next month, and nobody in their right mind is going to vote for that. I mean, it's just a common sense sort of thing. It's gonna be a hit to local governments for sure. And you should hear the League of Cities talk about this thing. I went to their dinner last night. Boy, they are upset about the homestead exemption. But it's going to cost Lake County about $7 million if that gets passed. I'm voting for it. You know, we'll find a way, but it will be a hit to county government. We'll have to go through, and that's one reason I said don't do all these additional hires and change your budgets too much this year. We need to see what we're going to handle after we have this fiscal cliff in November. Now that doesn't affect our budget until fiscal year 2020, but it's going to be $7 million is a significant amount to trim, and hopefully that will not result in raising of the tax rate. I know that's not what happens, but that's just another reason that I was hesitant to agree to any additional spending, which I would have anyway. But one reason I thought it was extremely important that we try to be pretty prudent and frugal about that. One issue that we dealt with as the economy improved, which is a great problem to have, is that our applications in our building department just skyrocketed within like a couple month period, and we ended up with a backlog. And so what we were able to do is we hired 4 additional people that work with the permitting department, and this is a department that pays for itself. The permitting fees pay to, goes to an enterprise fund, and they can use that for the department. And so we hired 4 other people, and we also delegated the authority to hire additional people to the county manager. So for example, we have our official county commission meetings every 2 weeks. If there were to be a spike in permits and we were to get behind 500 permits or something, the county manager doesn't have to wait on our approval to start that hiring process. We've given an authority to manage that to where we have an efficient process in place and we can get these permits turned around and keep the economy moving the way that we want it to be moving. So this next issue, and then I'll take some questions and things. And by the way, I have some handouts here on the budget. I'll show it to you in a second. This next issue is one that you've all followed, I'm sure. It's the issue with the Lake County Historical Society and the museum. That's one of the things I was alluding to earlier when I said it's surprising the things that you end up having to take a position on and vote on sometimes. It's not always just the budget issues that you're dealing with. Little background, if you don't know what's going on there, the Lake County Historical Society and its curator, the museum curator, Bob Grenier, was able to get a statue. They've been in Statuary Hall for almost a century. And it caused quite a bit of controversy. There were some folks that said, no, we don't want this in our museum. It's going to be controversial, et cetera, et cetera. And we did have a group of protesters show up unannounced one day at a county commission meeting. You were there, Gary. And it wasn't on the agenda. It's not something we control. We don't run the museum. We lease them space on the bottom floor of the historic courthouse. I'll just to give you an idea of who was at the meeting. The chairman of the Lake County Democratic Party, chairwoman, was there. There was a lot of Democratic sort of activists that were there. And Lauren Ritchie was there, which was good. It was good to see her. But anyway, so it was kind of a political sort of a hit job to show up and try to create controversy in something. And if you recall, back when some of this stuff was becoming an issue, that's why the statue is coming out of Statuary Hall. We're replacing that statue with a statue of Mary Bethune Cookman. Yes, thank you. And so the argument at the time was, rather than being a public place of distinction, it's probably time for some of the older Civil War style stuff to go into these museums, which I think a lot of people agree with that. A museum is a place for, you have to preserve some of these things. And so it was kind of like the goalpost moving. Once the museum opportunity was available, like, no, it just needs to be destroyed. We literally had people get up to the microphone and say, you need to melt it down and make a statue of someone else. Well, that's very Taliban-like. Remember the Taliban took over Afghanistan and started destroying Buddhist statues because Buddhism had at one time been prominent in Afghanistan. So anyway, initially probably read the news on this thing. Initially, the county commission, was like, well, we don't want to cause controversy. But I think that what has happened is that the mood has changed slightly to say, you know what, if we take everything offensive out of history books, there will be no history books. There will be a one-page summary. There's a lot of bad stuff that people have done in the past, stuff we should all be ashamed of as human beings. But you certainly don't start erasing things. You're falling prey to the sort of the millennial don't trigger me anywhere about anything attitude. And that's a dark road. That's a very dark road. And so anyway, I think what's going to happen at our last meeting, we sort of designated Commissioner Campion to be the liaison from the county commission to address this issue with the community in a way that ensures that all of the different things that are associated with that history, unpleasant things as well, are going to be a part of that museum. Going to be included in that story, which I think is important. I think you do need to share all of the facts when you preserve these things. And so that's the situation there. And I wrote an op-ed on the subject, and I submitted it to 4 newspapers, 2 printed it, the North Lake Outpost and the Daily Commercial. I ended up printing it, which I really appreciated because I do think it's an important cultural moment for us, and I think you have not just some millennials do that, but you have this group of people in this country that believe that there's some sort of right enshrined in the Constitution to never be offended and to never have to face an unpleasant situation. And that's just not there. It's just not there. And so I think that when you cave, the way that a lot of people have caved on a lot of things in our society, you cave on these traditional American values, they smell blood in the water. And it's just encouraging, and it leads to the frenzy that you see on a lot of these issues. And so I think you cannot give an inch on these foundational things. And if you do, I hate to think what my kids and my grandkids will be dealing with if we cave on something like this, on preserving American history. So anyway, that's really the update that I had tonight. I'm happy to take any questions. I did bring a copy. I didn't realize you had a complete library here. But I had an extra copy of On Liberty.
I'd like to read it.
Okay, well, I was going to give away as a prize if you can answer this quiz question.
Okay.
And this is sort of an unrelated political quiz question, but I'll give some background on this. I'm opposed to the idea that the government should spend a bunch of money and buy up land and never do anything with it, and then pay us to manage it, bill us to manage it. And so I thought I'd give you a fun fact here. What the percentage, whoever gets closest to this percentage wins this pristine, unread copy of all the because I have like 5 of these in the house. I hand them out like candy, Halloween. But anyway, here's the question. What percentage of Lake County is currently in permanent conservation? And this is a statistic that I got from the Florida Natural Areas Inventory, which Steve Traxel. What percentage of Lake County is in permanent conservation? Can never be developed.
30%.
35.
27.
What did you say, Vance?
35.
It's 34%.
I was close.
34%. I think Vance wins it. 34% of Lake County is in.
Give it to
You
Andy.
don't get it to Andy? Okay, then Andy can pass it on.
God bless you, Vance.
He
I
can
love
give-
you, man.
He can give us a book report.
That's right. That's right. So what I think I brought enough for everybody. I had one from last budget year. This is something that I think is really cool, and I stole this idea from Marion County, so I can't take credit for it. But it's breaking down about $1 of your property taxes and how it's spent. I'm particularly interested in this because you can see the sheriff's portion right there is quite healthy. So we're not underfunding anybody, in my personal opinion. But anyway, I have copies. This is actually last year, so it's like 1 cent difference, 1 percentage point difference. It's went up to 49% of our general revenue goes to the sheriff. But it just shows how it's spent. I think it's very helpful. This is on our website now. If you want to share this with anybody, you can get this on the website. I have this. The bigger one here is actually last year's budget because I didn't have enough of these. The smaller one is this year's. They're almost identical. A couple like 1 point differences in them. So it essentially tells the same story. But I'll put them on the table up here if anybody wants to take one home. And I think actually we're talking today about maybe putting on a banner when you walk into the county building so you know exactly how everything's being spent. But anyway, I'd be happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm going back to the Irma cleanup.
Okay.
Okay? And I understand where there is a public right-of-way, a road, a power line, a safety hazard, where that's a purpose of government to fix that as soon as possible, clean it up. But all of these property owners that have trees that fall down, and why is it our job, as a taxpayer, to go have other people's debris picked up?
Right, no, I agree.
Why do I have to pay for that?
Sure.
I mean, for example, on my property, it took me a while, but I cleaned up my stuff on my property. I didn't call up government and go, you guys need to get out here and clean up, haul this stuff to the landfill for me.
Sure.
Right? So where does that idea that the county commission has to provide that service?
I'm not sure where it came from. I can tell you that one issue that we had was folks who took advantage of the fact that we were cleaning up a lot of trees and did some work they've been meaning to do for a long time, and they just stuck it out by the road. And we dealt with some of that. Sometimes we were able to tell the difference, and call them out on it, but not always. I don't disagree with that. One issue that we had during Hurricane Irma was that we had 4 cities and 4 municipalities had agreements that I wasn't even aware of until after the hurricane, that we would front load the expense of cleanup for the municipalities, and that when they got reimbursed from FEMA, they'd pass it on to us. So we were taking all the liability and none of the benefit.
And
so
you're talking about the municipality wants to go and pick up everybody's trash pile?
Well, whatever they're doing on their city roads, basically, that the cleanup that they would have, we had 4 separate municipalities with contract agreements with them that we would front load, we would pay up front for that expense, and then when they get reimbursed, that's us. We're changing those contracts as they come up, so that we don't have liability that's none of our responsibility.
See, that is cutting out the free market. When you have a hurricane like that, and somebody wants their trash picked up,
Yeah. Speaking of the free market, did you know that Marion County does not have county garbage pickup? They have a list of vendors on their website, and you pick who you want. It's mom and pop businesses, you pick who you want, they come pick up your garbage.
that's what we had.
If you want it twice a week, you work it out with them.
I had that in Port St. Lucie.
Yeah.
They since have changed it, but it was amazing because I contracted with the one company. I didn't even have to take my garbage to the curb. They came up and got it. They didn't spill any.
It's like UPS versus the Postal Service.
Exactly.
Yeah, so anyway, just a comment. It is more expensive, I understand, because I looked into it. But it's the free market. You need better service.
Yep.
So, yes, ma'am.
I have a question. 2 weeks ago, Thursday, Useless had their city commission meeting. And I'm president of the Eustis Historical Museum, so I'm doing a grant thing, so I was going to attend the meeting, and I got the agenda out, and I saw this thing on Eustis's agenda about the statue, and I thought, why are they getting into this? And so I quickly looked up some stuff on Colonel White. Is that his name?
Oh, the general? Edmund Kirby Smith.
Oh, Smith.
Edmund
Kirby Smith, right. And I was running out of time, but I noticed that he was after the war, he was a professor in South Carolina, I believe, in mathematics and in botany, and somewhere I thought I saw where he had contributed to Lake County through the botany, something to do with botany, but I didn't have time to go and research it more. But I did speak to the commission. I was the only one that was speaking positive of the statute. We have a very liberal commission right now. So, but I wondered, do you know what?
Because Sabatini's not on there anymore.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anthony.
Yeah.
Anthony, when they hated Anthony.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I can tell you, I don't know about the Lake County side of that, but I do know that the University of Florida, the Museum of Natural History and the University of Florida has almost his entire botanical collection is held by them. So it's certainly still in Florida.
So what did they vote on something? Was there a
Oh
motion?
yeah, they voted to contact the the county.
Yeah, we've had a few cities, express that to us. My position is, if I got a letter from 1,000 cities, I'm not going to sincerely take it. So go ahead and send them. Yes, sir.
Josh, I just came to thank you for that article because I clipped every one of them. I love history. I appreciate your position on it, especially standing up for Bob Grenier. Because I talked to him very early on about the statue, and I went to St. Augustine to General Kirby's house, and I talked to the curator, and they talked about all the information they had about General Smith and how he maintained contact with his, I don't know whether he called it a slave, but he took with him to the Mexican War, the Indian Wars, and then they remained in contact until they passed away. So, and in fact, there's a statue of the general and this doctor in St. Augustine. So, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
That's one of the
Yes,
best
thank you.
articles about history.
Any other questions? Thanks, Matt. Don? You already had one.
We've been kicking down the road the gas tax.
Mm-hmm.
And commission has the opportunity to vote on it,
Mm-hmm.
or they can, how can I say this without sounding biased? Shift the responsibility to the consuming public. If we are electing you to lead our community, you, this council,
You'll be happy to know I voted against it. I mean, I voted to just kill it on the spot and not take it to the voters. I'm fine with the voters having a chance to speak on it, but my position was we just sort of reprioritize some of our general revenue, and we try to spend more. It's an interesting problem because it is, if you look at the historical trend, vehicles are becoming more fuel efficient, so you're not collecting as much as you did per mile. Back when cars were heavier and you were spending more on fuel, and thus more on fuel taxes. But my personal position is you sort of spend the money that you're spending on some of these other things I listed on basic infrastructure like roads, and you make sure that law enforcement is satisfactorily funded in some of these other things.
but isn't that a use tax?
What, a gas tax?
Yeah.
It is, but if you recall, Don, when I ran, I promised never to raise a tax or a fee. And it'll be a cold day in hell when I vote for a tax or a fee increase. Anybody else? Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.